Millionaire sees elderly widow being forced to pull a cart. Comment telling me what you thought of this story, giving a score from 0 to 10, and comment from which city you are watching me. I really want to know if you like my story and I want to get to know you better. So subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help. I was supposed to be at the meeting at 7 in the morning. The sun hadn't even properly risen when I took the dirt back road that cuts through the outskirts of rural Pennsylvania. But it was on that bend, right where the frost leaves the ground all white, that I heard it. It wasn't a scream. It was a dragged-out, weak groan, the kind of sound that comes from someone who no longer has the strength to even call for help. I told my driver to pull over. On the side of the road, a white-haired woman was pulling a heavy cart, alone, barefoot, with ropes over her shoulders like a pack animal. The freezing cold cut through the skin, and she was shivering but kept walking. I got out of the car. I asked her if she needed help. She looked at me with that kind of suspicion that only someone who has been deceived many times can have. But she accepted. I helped push the cart to an old shed where she used to store her things. Martha, 71 years old, a widow, a scrap collector. I am Arthur Sterling, 48 years old, former police chief. Today an agribusiness entrepreneur, rich enough not to need to stop on a dirt road to help anyone. But I stopped, and that changed everything. I went back the next day. I brought groceries. Martha was suspicious again, but accepted. We talked. She told me her husband had died 3 months earlier, that the cart wasn't hers. It belonged to a man named Harrison Vance, the owner of the town's recycling depot. She said he lends things to folks, but charges in a way that they never finish paying. I noticed there was something more. Martha spoke slowly, choosing her words. On the 5th day, she finally told me. Harrison wasn't just the depot owner. He controlled the lives of several collectors in the area. Small loans, favors, the use of the carts, and he collected it all with forced labor and humiliation. He genuinely believed that making an elderly woman pull a cart in the freezing early morning was a way to cure laziness. A man in a suit, meticulous, polite, and absolutely cruel. Martha showed me a folded paper she kept at the bottom of the cart, a copy of documents Harrison had forged to seize the houses of 2 other collectors. He used the debt contracts as a legal basis. I looked at that paper. I felt an anger I hadn't felt in years. Cold anger. The anger of someone who was once a police chief and knows exactly what to do with it. I started writing everything down in a black notebook. On the 6th day, I got a message. Tyler, a young neighbor of Martha's who worked at the depot, came to warn me. Harrison knew a stranger was asking questions, and he didn't like it. The following night, 2 men cornered me in a dark alley. Brad and Vince. They shoved me against the wall. The conversation was short. They told me I was sticking my nose where it didn't belong. I took a punch to the face, another to the ribs. I went home with a cut over my eye and breathing hurt. But I didn't go to the hospital. I went straight to the black notebook. I realized I couldn't act alone. I needed allies. And the only ones I knew in town were people who were also afraid of Harrison. Sarah, a county social worker, had been trying for 2 years to build a case against him. David, a newly graduated lawyer who did pro bono work for poor families. Emily, a journalist for a regional news portal who had already been threatened with a lawsuit when she tried to write a story. Each of them was afraid. I needed to earn that trust. But Harrison was already a step ahead. On the 10th day, Martha disappeared. I searched for 2 days. When I found her, she was in a cheap downtown boarding house, holding a bag and with red eyes. She said that if she kept talking to a stranger, she would lose the right to use the shed. And without the shed, she had nowhere to store the materials. And without the materials, she had no income. She looked at me with a calmness that hurt more than any crying. She told me he didn't need to hurt her. He just needed to leave her with no way out. That's when I understood. Harrison wasn't a violent man. He was worse. He was calculating. He knew every legal limit, every weak point of every person around him. And he knew Martha was the key to the case. I convinced Sarah and David to join me. Emily agreed to record everything. But on the 13th day, Brad and Vince came back, this time with 2 more men. The beating left me unable to get out of bed for 3 days. And the black notebook vanished. The evidence vanished with it. It was Martha who turned the tables. When I went to her house, still with my ribs bandaged, she looked at me differently. Serious. Determined. She told me she had kept everything stored right there, pointing to her own head. Every document number that passed through his hands in the last 2 years she remembered. Not on paper, inside her mind. I spent the night listening to Martha dictate. Dates, values, names, registration numbers. David wrote it down. Sarah cross-referenced it with the county files. Emily recorded it. On the 17th day, Harrison showed up at my house, wearing a suit, calm, smiling. He sat in my living room and made an offer. Money. A lot of money. For me to drop the subject and leave town. He told me I was a smart man, that I knew how the world worked, and that some battles weren't worth fighting. I refused, and for the first time, Harrison lost control. Only for 3 seconds. But it was enough. He left his phone unlocked on the table. Martha, who was in the hallway listening, saw the message on the screen. The name of the public official who signed the fake registries. The final piece. On the 19th day, I led the district attorney's team to Harrison's depot. I brought everything. The illegal contracts, the forged registries, the statements from Martha, Nancy, Betty, and Susan, Emily's recordings, the corrupt official's name. Harrison was there, organizing papers, meticulous as always. When he saw the team coming in, he didn't run. He didn't yell. He just stood there, with the look of someone who never imagined losing. The verdict came weeks later. Harrison returned the properties he had taken. He was sentenced to mandatory community service for the scrap collectors. He would have to carry with his own bare hands the materials he always ordered others to carry. I spent the last few days of that 3rd week on a rural property that belonged to my father. Martha went with me. We stayed there, in the quiet of the countryside, watching the first signs of rain after the frost. She drank tea. I read. Neither of us needed to say anything. The silence this time wasn't the silence of someone who is alone. It was the silence of someone who, finally, rested. The cart is still there, leaning against the shed, but now it belongs to Martha, and she no longer has to pull it alone. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.